The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in their contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. For the last few years, I have consistently kept up my regular upload schedule here on this channel by filling it with me playing video games and talking over them in the format that I knew way back in the day as Let's Play. Though, from time to time, you may have seen me try something else. Usually it's some random song snippets or the occasional Discord rant that I was having with friends, which I let get blown so far out of proportion I had to sit down and script out my arguments into their own mini essay. Very rarely, or reaching even further back into the back catalog, you may find evidence of when I would make short highlight reels or one-off gag videos for some clip or another. Then, in the far-off times of 7 to 10 years ago, I was known to make compilation videos of this other nerd on the internet who was playing video games and talking over them in the format then known as Let's Playing. But today, I think I'm going to try my hand at the currently popular and well-worn genre of content that is the pretentious video essay. The only problem is, I don't think I have any long-form topics I am particularly well-researched and knowledgeable in that could be suited for a video essay. At best, I have personal anecdotes or light surface-level observations, but those are basically only good for 3 to 5 minute long vlog videos. Those have gone out of style now as the demand for second monitor viewing has grown to a fever pitch, while the algorithm pushes for more and more engagement time. You have to really have something long, drawn out, and most intimidating of all, thoroughly wordy to actually put together a decent video essay these days. So, while I do have dozens of half-started scripts and scraps of writing laying around my Google Docs, they all seem to putter out of steam before I have anything sufficiently built up. Most, I'm not even sure, have the depth to the subject for them to stand up on their own. They just don't have enough layers. Others have been covered to death in much greater detail than I could ever hope to. Noah Caldwell-Gervais or Dan Olson, I am not. So that is where this script has languished for the better part of Mind Your Own Business, and till out of the blue, I had the idea for a kind of framing device that would let me turn a bunch of rambling nonsense into, maybe with a little bit of luck, something coherent? Let me know if this works as well as I'm hoping it does. You can do the whole Leek, cement, and Subsandwich thing. We all know the mantra by now. So, without further ado, the Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in their contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. Putting secrets in things is pretty nifty. Easter eggs are elevated in-jokes as the reward for thorough train spotting. Not everything has to be surface-level text, so if you want to spell out a secret message by just looking at the first letter of every sentence, go for it. It's a straight-up neat thing to include little extra rewards for those who want to dig that much deeper into something they are already enjoying. No one can blame you if you want to sneak in the lick or the Mario Kart riff into the occasional jazz solo, and if you know, you know. If you don't, no harm, no foul. You can still find meaning in all the references you don't get. I think that sometimes, though, people go a bit far with their secrets or Easter eggs and torture them into something too grand while trying to make a big statement, rather than just being some nuggets of extra goodness for those who happen to stumble across them. Maybe, if I was pressed, you could get another 57-minute and 39-second ramble out of me where I talk about how hiding long philosophical lectures in the basement of your puzzle game isn't really a good Easter egg, no matter how many different lines in them connect to other aspects of your game. Heck, it might even be worth it to bring all that up and how it relates to intercontextuality in art and how remixing and reincorporation are related to what I'm talking about here in general. But nah, not today. Maybe not ever. That snarled tangle of a rant is best saved in my Google Drafts, spun off into some generalized thoughts about puzzle design as it slowly morphed away from what not to do because I don't like it, and more into what I do like and want to do. That's the spirit I want to celebrate. Just making little things that can mean a lot to those who do intentionally seek them out, or by pure chance happen to stumble across them. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in their contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. I wouldn't say I have much musical prowess, but I've dabbled in making some ditties in the past. I wouldn't go so far as to call them fully fledged songs. They're too short to be looped on their own. As is, they're just parts that need to be stitched together into something whole. The song sketching app of choice that I use is Beepbox, a super lightweight program that sits somewhere in power below a more traditional digital audio workspace, but a bit more friendly than other esoteric tracker software I've tried to learn in the past. I like it so much that I made a tutorial for how to make a music using it, as a way to show friendos it was a viable option they could use, because I thought it was pretty neat. And that video kinda got away from me and is probably my biggest impact on the internet at large. Oops. Yeah, well, I like to think that it's putting some good out there in the world to offset the other bits of nonsense I've made. But a few folks have noticed that I keep doing silly little musical projects on the side and asked me to flex those muscles trying to make fake bit chiptune covers for stuff they were working on. I think that is an interesting challenge, and it also has helped me improve my own compositional skills in a pretty fundamental way. The trick with chiptunes, the real ones, not my fake approximations, is that you're working with a limited number of channels. That is, instruments, and those instruments themselves are pretty restrictive. Specifically that they, by and large, can only play one note at a time. For the sake of simplification, let's say that is a maximum of 3 sound channels and a noise channel, which is static that can be used to approximate drums. So, if I want to play 3 notes at the same time to make a chord, that means there's no other way for me to play a melody at the same time then. What this does is really makes you think about how songs are put together, because typically you are just working with a melody, harmony, and then bass or counter melody, sometimes cycling which 3 are playing at the same time, but never more than 3. There is one trick I know to get some more sound out of this setup, and that's to abuse the fact that they aren't real instruments. So you can play notes inhumanly fast, allowing you to play chords as arpeggios. That is, sweeping single notes up and down rapidly, tricking your ear into hearing them as chords. Kinda like how animation is just still images played fast enough that your eye imagines the in-betweens connecting them all together into one fluid approximation of motion. Then, by taking any existing song and listening carefully, trying to distill it down into just 3 available channels, you start paying attention to exactly what the essentials are in it. What is actually carrying the song, the parts doing the heavy lifting, how it's driving along. This has helped me get a deeper appreciation of, oh yeah, 2 of the greatest songs from 2 of the greatest composers of our time. When you put on artificial restrictions like that, while still having something that you know works and is affecting to sit back and reference, there's a lot to be learned and even some room to still find your own creative exploits in order to actually crush it down as much as needed, even if that means leaving a lot on the cutting room floor. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. I'm a crazy person who wants bonus features on their DVDs, and I've noticed that this is lost in the current day and age of streaming. More and more you've seen Disney Plus or Amazon Prime put out miniseries with their behind-the-scenes footage or making-of talking head interviews, but those tend to come off as more polished companion pieces. They seem as if it was a separate production team's whole job while principal photography was going on, an offshoot spin-up of some new hires to test their mettle. These featurettes are there to pad out the total number of shows and hours available on the platform, or to pump out a secondary branded product for them to advertise after the main attraction has already been binged and is cycled off the front page, only there as a way to sucker in a few more clicks and a little more watch time from people jonesing for that next hit of content. Nah, the kind of bonus features I want feel like they were snuck in after the fact by someone who just happened to have some scraps they'd been working on that they weren't quite able to get into the final release. I crave those half-finished VFX demo reels, the recording booth's cutting room floor swept into a recycle bin but not yet emptied out and now saved, a collection of behind closed doors production materials or promotional content that you won't see after the publicity cycle is finished. Heck, I'm not even talking about the loss of commentary tracks. You can still find those if you criterion hard enough. Or maybe you're into the more popular riff track these days. All I want is the extra schnibblies to go along with the main attraction that wouldn't otherwise see the light of day. And I don't really think that's too much to ask for, except for the problem that it might rough up the edges of the perfect brand synergy of immaculately curated content currently cluttering up my Netflix queue. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in their contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. Editing is an art form all of its own. It is an artistic expression, just as much as putting pen to paper, brush to canvas, or light to celluloid. Yes, it's using existing content as a base, but I don't know, I think there's something genuinely creative to slapping some doofy filters over a quick Photoshop job and mashing that shitpost button. There may even be no new ground covered fundamentally, yet I will still never, as long as I live, run out of wonder and joy when clicking on a new Steamed Hams remix. The song mashup is a well-respected party trick for the DJ. I'm halfway to a full city set there myself, with 2 different slam jams in my back catalog. The painstaking effort of sentence mixing audio clips into the garbled mess of whatever YouTube poop you need to make is soon going to become a lost art in the wake of AI voice cloning, in much the same way recording mixtapes off the radio is long since faded into distant memory. Much art with a capital F has been made over how poetry can just be the purposeful use of formatting text, to the point where I've heard it argued that a specific game facts guide that is, given a monospace font, perfectly justified text only through careful and deliberate word choice is an example of poetry. That's all thanks to editing, baby. But even just something simple, something unnoticeable, something you don't really get to appreciate unless you are peeking behind the curtain, is the mountains of bog standard run-of-the-mill everyday rough draft editing going on. Not that I would know anything about such a practice. I simply drop all my work straight off the top of my dome. No scripts or tests or rehearsing or audio touch-ups or the final going over with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it comes out this pristine and well thought out. Nah, I just fire from the hip and hit the bullseye every single time. That pay no attention to the run-on sentences leading nowhere alongside the half-baked and then abandoned ideas and trains of thoughts. Some idiot who did numbers real good once said, "If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter." And like, good job, dumbass. That's not how effort being turned into products works. The more time you have, the more shit you make. In fact, I retract my previous statement regarding the guy being good at numbers. I should probably go back and cut it from this rant, but I already didn't do that, so, well, there's nothing I can do about it now. Looping back around and tying a nice bow on it, I keep finding new ways to flex my chopping muscles by challenging myself to make short-form content, i.e. shorts for YouTube, condensing and crushing clips out of context into bite-sized morsels of engagement bait, distilled as possible for mass appeal, apart from my longer-form stuff. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots shown in their contextual sequence impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. I have tried a lot of stuff over the years, and I don't think I've yet to develop my own identifiable personal style. I'm basically just making this stuff up as I go, trying out new things that happen to strike my fancy, when those strange moods take over and I am compelled to churn out some new creative work. However, I do like to think there is some sort of through line you can trace between different things I've made, even if these trends only emerged in hindsight. when there was no real rhyme or reason at the time behind why I included certain elements. Sometimes I've needed a wordless backing track for part of a death compilation, and my go-to of video game soundtracks just didn't provide enough dissonance with the game footage being played. So I slap on classical music in the background, as it added a sense of gravitas to the failure that heightened the absurdity of it all. Maybe the music could even sync up to some of the deaths, as a neat little trick to add extra impact and really get into the groove of the edit, so to speak. These classical music segments also make for nice stingers after the main action is done, a kind of bonus at the end of a video. Sometimes I have more than one participant to keep track of, and I used multiple sound effects to differentiate between them, and well, now I have those sound effect files saved and ready to repurpose. I do have to wonder if that is what running jokes are. The fact that you've already put in the legwork once to make a setup and payoff, and you can just keep cashing that check for years to come and pay off and pay off and pay off with creative asset reuse. By now, I have a nice little stable of tricks to spice up anything bland or indistinctive, even if the tools are pretty primitive or not particularly groundbreaking of a reach to come up with. Gee, wow, I used a song that had cannons in it over footage of explosions. That sure took a while to figure out. Probably wasn't much thought put into it at the time beyond just pure necessity. No true creative spark or inspiration that was being drawn on. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots, shown in their contextual sequence, impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. On the second disc of The Incredibles DVD set, the main menu is an imitation of the villain Syndrome's secret layer supercomputer operating system. It flashes up various little schematics for visual flair as it loops in the background, waiting for you to select one of the animated shorts, behind the scenes footage, or deleted scenes. But if you hover over the intro option, at some point in the looping menu, an extra selectable symbol pops up for a brief moment, and moving over to it will play. I'm just gonna link you to the one YouTube rip I can find. If I had any faith that I could play it in its entirety, I would, but I figure I would get turbo shut down. You owe it to yourself to check out the clip. It's less than 3 minutes of your life, and you'll probably enjoy it more than the totality of the almost 20 minutes you've wasted listening to me drone on by now. But for the purposes of keeping us all on the same track, I will do my best to describe it. If you can't be arsed to pause the video, do some homework, and come back. Alright, let's open the textbook and I'll read along for you mid-class, okay? Buttons and Doors opens on a black screen with the quote, "To all the people whose hard work resulted in the strangest accumulation of buttons and doors in Pixar's history. Hugs and kisses, Brad." My cursory Google investigation skills can't confirm that the director of the film is behind the heavily edited sequence that makes up the rest of the runtime, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he was. What follows is all set to the Anvil Chorus, a song that starts Act 2 in the opera Il Trovatore, which heavily features the rhythmic percussive beating of hammers striking metal anvils at the two climactic crescendoing choruses. For the accompanying visuals to this background music, we see a montage. I'm not going to bother checking, but it is an excessive, if not entirely exhaustive, sequence of different shots in the movie where buttons are being pressed, mostly in an extravagant or emphatic fashion, though some are rather mundane. As the music swells and the editing becomes more frenetic, we reach our energetic peak and the singers erupt into a boisterous swaying chorus, where you can almost hear them rocking back and forth. The clips now alternate shots between buttons being pressed, followed by some still quite frankly, and pardon the pun, it may or may not be deliberate, incredible looking CGI explosions. Everything so far has been removed from its original place in the film, no regard to the chronology for what shot is to be placed where other than the pure vibe of it all, and so none of these buttons being pressed are relevant to which explosion is being shown to take place. This all builds to a head, yet even more bombastic with one final fiery eruption as the chorus reaches its conclusion, and we start again. After all, I did promise 2 movements to this song, and we've only been served the first half of the title for this C-word bonus short. Doors start swooshing or swinging open in more ways than you thought you knew how to operate them. The barrage of different high-tech whooshes and thwips are a welcome sonic layer, as the futuristic design glides effortlessly, some with multiple panes to clear in rapid succession, only to be punctuated by more archaic and, dare I say, acoustic counterparts. Then, on cue, the opera singers break out into chorus as the inevitable reverse action takes place. Not content to just show one function of the subject matter, what once was open must now be shut. As every door closes, we then cut to a new, somehow even more impactful punctuation of explosions, as if the abrupt end to one motion led to the complete destruction of something else. They need not even be forceful, as the gentle movement of an elevator entrance slowly coming to a stop sets off fireworks. Then, as a final statement to the whole piece, we see one continuous shot of a car door unable to be closed, pushed harder and harder each time, the melody playing its last repeated motif until a final slam is given, and lo, the largest fireball of them all blossoms forth, and the short film is concluded. A parting quote fades in and out. The Incredibles. No sequence unexploded. Credited to John Walker, the producer of the movie. The Cooleshov effect is when a group of shots shown in their contextual sequence impart more meaning than any of the constituent shots in isolation. Yes,